Chapter 2. Kattappa. The hunting party was speeding through the forest. A lean, dark young man ran alongside the elephant that carried the king of Mahishmati. Ahead of him, his father rode a white horse that had a plume on its head. Behind him, amid the soldiers, rode the princess of Mahishmati on their chestnut mares. A train of soldiers straggled behind them, weighed down by the carcasses of hunted deer and wild boars on their shoulders. Shadows of trees had started crawling towards the east. Mist was creeping up from the bushes. They had been hunting since morning, but for a party of 30 people, the catch was pitiful. The drizzle that had started the previous night had made the forest damp and dirt squishy. Katappa ran ahead and made arrangements for camping. The man on the white horse turned and addressed his son. Katappa selected a few slaves who could help him and left the procession. A group of bards was already waiting under the trees, busy tanging their tamburas and tuning their mridangas. When Katappa reached the camping site, they stood up reluctantly. The black steel ring around his neck marked him a slave, but the way he carried himself made them show grudging respect. Katappa asked them to make space and they moved away, huddling together, whispering amongst each other as he got busy giving instructions to erect tents and lay down carpets. His thoughts turned to his younger brother Shivappa. At 17, Shivappa was yet to graduate from the position of a palace slave, the one who did menial jobs for his masters, but he never saw the world outside the palace. He was not old enough to accompany the Maharaja's hunting party, but he had been adamant about joining them that morning. Only their father's scolding has made him retreat in sullen silence. But Shivappa was not one to giving up so easily. Later, Katappa had to smuggle in his brother, but who was now working at the rear end of the hunting party, helping soldiers carry their baskets and water pots. Their father, of course, was unaware. Katappa worried, but has brought his own cover. There would be a price to pay if their father came to know. Katappa shouted for everyone to work faster as he watched the first of the king's horses turn towards the camp. Servants were arranging bales of hay for the horses and filling huge copper vessels with the water for the elephants to drink. Soon the air was filled with the sounds of whinnying and the tread of shoes as a hunting party approached. Katappa ran his gaze all over the camp to ensure that he had been set up as per order. This was the first hunt where he had been given such a big responsibility and he did not want to botch it up. When he looked back at the contingent, the elephant carrying the king was already kneeling for his majesty to alight. Katappa saw his father jumping down from his horse and hurrying towards the king. His father kneeled before the king and Maharaja Somadeva climbed down, stepping on Malayappa's shoulders. Hey, you slave boy! Katappa tensed. He knew there was nothing wrong with being called a slave boy. After all, that was what he was. But every time he heard it, it reeled him. More than the word slave, it was being called a boy at the age of 22 by Bijala, who was younger to him by a few months, that upsets him more. Hiding his disdain and putting on an expression of extreme servitude, he turned towards the voice. Prince Bijala gestured for him to come near his horse. Katappa walked over, and the prince indicated that he should kneel down. People were watching him. Brother, he is elder to you, Prince Mahadeva said in a shrill voice. Vijala snickered. Slaves don't have any age or names for the matter. They are bound to obey what we say. But Vijala's arms shot out and slammed into Katappa above his left ear. The world spun around the slave. He had not seen it coming. When I ask you to kneel, you have to kneel immediately. Bijala punctuated his order with another slap on Katappa's cheek. Katappa hurried, knelt down. Bijala stepped on his lean shoulders and got down from the horse. Katappa swayed under the weight of Bijala, lost his balance, and fell flat on the ground with the prince. There was a silence, and everyone looked at them. Prince Mahadeva laughed. Bijala stood up. His fine silk dhoti was streamed with mud. Katappa was scared. He had made a big mistake. He saw Bijala's anger growing on his face. He took a step back as Bijala snarled and drew out his whip. Katappa's throat went dry. Bijala took a step forward and cracked the whip. It did not connect with Katappa, but he was terrified. He closed his eyes, waiting for the lash to bite. No, Anna. Katappa could hear Mahadeva crying out, "Oh, no, please, that will only anger him further." Katappa thought. Bijala would lash around his arm and cracked it again. Katappa took a step back in fear, stumbled, and fell down his back. Bijala towered on him, his curly head blocking the sun. Katappa could feel the dampness of the grass and was acutely aware of the sharpness of the grass tips. He crawled on his back, pushing with his hands and legs to side, as far away from Bijala as possible. "Mercy, your highness, mercy," he cried as a lash arced above his head and cracked across his face. He gritted his teeth and tried unsuccessfully to stop the tears. A tongue of fire burned across his cheeks, his shoulders, nose, stomach, thighs as Katappa pressed his lips tight, determined not to cry aloud. The lash cracked again and again. This was his fate, the fate of his ancestors. He was nothing but a slave who was supposed to give his life to protect the royal family of Maheshwari. Yet somewhere deep inside his heart it hurt. He was no better than a horse, or perhaps that was an overestimation. Horses had better foots and had non-leaking roofs over their heads. Anna, he heard Sherpa's voice at a distance. His eyes blurred in tears, and blood could make out Sherpa running towards him. "No, oh my Gauri, no, no," he wanted to scream. He was Shivapa's wrathful face and closed his eyes. He opened them only when he heard Bijala's agonized cry. The prince had covered his nose with his palm, but blood spurted through the gaps between his fingers. Katappa saw a bloodied stone rolling away from his feet, and Shivappa taking aim with another stone. Katappa screamed at him to stop and run. Everything was happening so fast. Katappa's heart sank as he saw their father rushing towards them with a whip in his hand. The second stone that Shivappa hurled whisked past them without hitting anything and bounced off the ground, splashing bobs of mud in its wake. Before he could pick up a third one, Malayapa's whip cracked and he Shivappa across his face. The boy fell down screaming and started rolling on the ground as his father continued to hit him mercilessly. "You dare hurt the prince you are supposed to protect, you thankless god!" Malayappa screamed as he cracked the whip. Katappa tried to intervene but faced his father's wrath. "Stay away. This is all your fault. How dare you disobey me? Please stop." "It was not Katappa's fault," Prince Mahadeva cried. Malayappa bowed deep when he heard the prince speak. "I want him to die. He broke my nose. Kill him, kill him, kill him." Prince Bijala wrote. The royal physician was applying medicines to his bleeding nose. Malayappa resumed beating his son. Prince Mahadeva ran to Maharaja Somadeva. "Father, do something. Please ask him to stop. Please, father, please." Katappa saw his father stop for a moment and await the king's response. Maharaja Somadeva's face was cast in stone and he was deaf to the cries of Prince Mahadeva. Malayappa gave the whip to Katappa and said, "You will punish him now. Father, you brought him where he did not belong and he did not what he was not supposed to do. It is your punishment too. Now did it." Katappa took the whip with trembling hands. Shivappa was already bleeding from wherever the whip had licked him. Katappa looked at his brother's face, expecting the boy to plead for mercy, but Shivappa had a calm expression. He wished that his brother would at least cry out, but the 21 lashes that Katappa dealt out what could not even extract a whimper from him. Through each shredded Katappa's heart, Shivappa just started into his brother's eyes as a whip arced around him before ripped his skin. It was at the moment that Katappa started hating his life. It was already past midnight when Katappa went to his little brother. By that day, the bards had got too drunk to continue their praises about the illustrious ancestors of the Mahashmati royal clan and their brave deeds. The dancing girls had gone with their suitors, and from the bushes around the tents, Katappa could hear their hushed laughter. The king had retired to his royal tent, and so had the other important dignitaries. His father, in all probability, was tending to the king. Katappa was burning with guilt for how he had been forced to treat his brother. Shopa lay under a tree with nailed roots and crooked branches. Katappa walked carefully and trying not to break even a dry twig on his day. The smell of herb past that the physician had applied on his brother's body intensified as he neared the tree. Shepa was whimpering. A dull moon hung from the sky. As Katappa neared his brother, something scampered away into the bushes. I am sorry, Katappa's voice choked up. Does it hurt? Shepa did not respond. His eyes were closed. Katappa's hand trembled as he reached out to touch the gashes the whip had made on his brother's skin. He withdrew at the last moment and his eyes misted up. Kamakshi, Shepa was mumbling in a daze. You are right. I am just a slave. Katappa recalled. His brother was still seeing that girl despite his father's warning, despite his best advice. Who would drive sense into his thick head? Shivappa, Katappa looks him, and his brother opened his eyes. You have no right to see her again. You want her to get killed. Why are we slaves? Sherpa asked, standing Katappa by the abruptness of his question. Katappa did not have an answer. This was something he often asked himself. He was vaguely aware of some vow taken by his ancestors many generations ago. His mother, when she was alive, would smile whenever he asked her that question, ruffled his curly hair, and he said that it was their destiny. It was written. Some unknown god sitting in some place had willed that some people should be masters and others slaves. Katappa could see the light from the dying embers near the king's tent. His father crouched in front of it. He could see part of his father's face lit up by the golden hue of the fire. His father might be the closest aide of the Maharaja of the Mahashpati, but it still left a bad taste to think that he was merely a slave. Katappa knew that he too would live, serve, and die for his master, unacknowledged and unalimented, just like any other slave. Thankfully, his brother has closed his eyes, the question forgotten for the moment. He was moaning in pain. Are you feverish? Your skin is burning, Katappa said as he touched his forehead, but Shivappa only coiled into a fetal position and mumbled his lover's name. Katappa stood watching him helplessly. Mist weaved itself through the tree leaves. The only sound was the drone of the crickets and the labored breathing of his brother. There was a sudden rustle of dry leaves, and Katappa turned. Oh, so that it was the slaves too when the masters are not looking. Katappa had never expected Prince Vigila to come where the slaves slept. He bowed with alacrity, unsure of what to do next. From the corner of his eyes, he saw Prince Mahadeva running towards them from the camp. Calls his brother. You dare to throw a stone at your prince, and you think you can get away with some casual whipping by your elder brother. Prince Vigila stood with a whip in his hand, glaring at them. He cracked the whip in the air and then wound it around his forearm. Clever was not he, you blasted father. He thought quickly for a slave, and my knave father fell for it. Katappa fell at Prince Vigila's feet and clasped them as if his very life depended on it. Swami, mercy, mercy. Prince Mahadeva, who had arrived on the scene, tried to drag his brother away, but Vigila shoved him. The older prince waved his index finger at his brother and said, Stay away, you coward. I will teach you how to treat slaves. This bastard thinks he can get away so easily after hurting the crown prince of Mahishmati. Mahadeva cried, Shivappa, run to his majesty and seek protection, or else my brother will kill you. Shivappa hesitated a moment. Bijala lunged towards him, snapping the whip. Shivappa moved to the side to avoid the blow and then began running towards the camp. Bijala kicked Katappa away and screaming abuse chased Shivappa, ordering him to stop. Katappa ran behind Bijala, pleading for mercy. He saw Shivappa falling down as Bijala closed in on him. His brother rolled away as Bijala lashed the whip at him. Shivappa got up and continued to run towards a camp. He soared to the left, where the king's elephant was standing. A chill passed down Katappa's spine. In a flash, he understood what his brother was trying to do. Katappa fed the elephant, Girisha. The beast was quite attached to his brother. There could be no gentler creature on earth than Girisha, and it was one reason why the Maharaja had chosen to ride on his moving mountain. But Katappa knew the elephant obeyed his brother's command, and Shivappa was leading to the prince to the beast. No, Shivappa, no, Katappa cried, but his voice was drowned out in the screams of Bijala. Men who were dancing and singing around the campfire stopped to watch the unfolding scene. Shivappa reached the elephant and stood panting near the legs of the beast. The elephant stood still, munching palm leaves. The mahout was asleep on the ground near the beast, perhaps drunk. Vijala swung his whip. It was if Shivappa was expecting the move. He ducked and the whip caught the elephant under its eyes. I trumpeted in pain. The mahout woke up with alacrity, but when he saw angry prince, he moved away. Bijala was too furious to notice. He cracked his whip again at Shivappa. This time cut Shivappa's face. He fell down, crying, begging for mercy. Katappa knew if it was a ruse. He saw his brother unchaining the elephant in a swift move. The next lash of the whip caught in the elephant's legs. Shivappa rolled away to the other side of the beast and started pledging for mercy. Cursing, Bijala walked around the beast to reach the slave. Katappa was a few feet away when he tripped on a stone and fell on his face. When he had steadied himself and stood up, his blood froze. He yelled, "Move away, your highness." Before he could complete his sentences, the elephant had fell from Bijala's hand as he flailed his limbs, screaming in abject terror. A moment later, the beast slammed Bijala to the ground. The prince twitched for a moment, and when still, the beast lifted its leg to crush Bijala's head. Time stood still. Katappa shouted at the beast. Girisha, no. The elephant hesitated, holding its leg in the midair for a moment. Katappa dove and yanked Bijala away as a heavy foot of the beast came down. It missed Bijala's head by a whisker. Katappa lifted Bijala on his shoulder and started running. He could hear the beast trumpeting at him. He ran for his life, but he knew it was difficult to outrun a charging elephant with Bijala on his shoulder. It was impossible. Then he saw Prince Mahadeva, who had been running towards them, stop in his tracks, stunned. "Run, Prince, move out of the way," Katappa screamed, but Mahadeva stood transfixed by terror. Katappa knew everything was lost. One, perhaps both princes were going to die. He would die with them, but his death would be in vain. He placed the unconscious Bijala on the ground and turned towards the approaching beast. Behind him, the Prince Mahadeva cowered with fear. The elephant charged down at them with thundering speed. Katappa tried to remember what his father had told him about Marma Vidya, the ancient martial art of stunning an opponent by striking at the nerve center in the head, but he was not sure whether it applied to elephants. The elephant charged at him and caught him mid-riff with its trunk. It lifted Katappa up in the air. As it brought its trunk down to slam him to the ground, the pounded both his fists on the elephant's head with all the power he could muster. It was of no use. He was throwing violently to the ground. He had a glimpse of the gigantic leg of the beast coming down, and he closed his eyes shut. A moment later, the earth shook as the elephant collapsed on its knees, trumpeting wildly. Everything went blank for Katappa. He woke up when cold water pricked his eyes. His head was throbbing, and his surroundings seemed hazy. The only reason was sharp smell of burning oils from the torches and the coldness of the air. He blinked slowly his father's face and came into focus. Near him stood Maharaja Somadeva. Katappa tried to get up, but the king gently pushed him back. The agitated cries of the birds in the forest canopy had died down, but the cold fear in Katappa's heart was yet to thaw. His mind raced with different possibilities. Had Bijala died? Had he failed to protect him? Then he saw soldiers carry away a limp Bijala. He saw Prince Mahadeva was tending to the fallen elephant. He was relieved that the elephant had not died. The effect of the stunning blow would fade away in 1 or 2 yamams. Your body has grown up, Malepa, Maharaja Samadeva said. He saved my sons. No reward could be sufficient other than to give him the highest honor possible. I know he is young, but he did show him to braver than any of the slaves or soldiers. Let him, the Sevaga of Prince Bijala. The soldiers around cheered and applauded, and Malepa was in tears. He fell at the king's feet, Prabhu, a great honor, as a very great honor for a humble slave. I do not know how to thank your generosity. He beckoned to Katapa, and his slave boy slowly stood up. His knees were stiff and his back still hurt, but he fell at the king's feet alongside his father. Arise, Maharaja Samadeva commanded, and father and stood up hurriedly, covering their mouth with their palms and going as low as possible. For many generations, Katapa, your family has lived and died for the sake of Maheshwari, and I hope your sons too shall follow the glorious tradition of your ancestors. The king said. Mahadeva, who was tending to the fallen elephant along with the Rajavaidya, stood up and walked to them. He took Katapa's hands in his hand, said with a smile, I have no words to thank you, Katapa. As long as I am alive, I will be indebted to you for saving my life and my brothers. Katapa bowed, his face flushing with embarrassment. He touched Mahadeva's feet and, unable to control the happiness and emotion sweeping over him, he started weeping. Mahadeva picked up him and hugged the slave briefly. Then he was gone with the king's entourage. No slave had the privilege to be touched by a royal unless it was during a war or in the line of duty. Unless it was to save his life, a slave was allowed to touch only the feet of his master. A prince touching him, thanking for merely doing his duty. Such things were unheard of. Even the king had touched him. Words choked in Katapa's throat, and he stood dazzled by his fortune. The bats had already started making songs about how the brave Prince Vijala and Mahadeva had fought hand in hand with a slave to tame the charging elephant. Katapa felt proud. For generations they would sing of the bravery of the Prince of Maheshwari, but a small part of the glory would be his. His name may not be taken, but it did not matter. He made his father proud. He felt grateful to the king and princess. He was fortunate to be born in Maheshwari. For a slave, he was a great honor to be elevated to the post of Sevaga of the eldest prince. His father had achieved that honor at the age of 25 when he became a member of the personal guard of Maharaja Samadeva. Katapa was barely 22. The king was no doubt a great man, but a thought kept nagging Katapa. Why had the king not uttered a single word when he was forced to punish his brother at the whim of the prince? Perhaps he was too small to understand the wisdom of the king. His lot was not to think, but to serve, and he had served well. He snapped out of his thoughts as he heard his father asking him to carry his brother. Sherpa was sitting near the tree where the elephant was tied earlier. He appeared too tired to lift himself up. For a moment, a wave of anger swept through Katapa, and he eyed his younger brother. No one else might have noticed it, but it had clearly seen what his brothers did. I was unpardonable. Sherpa's dark eyes burned like embers when Katapa stooped to him, left up in the shoulders. I was drizzling again, and the frogs started abusing each other from the bushes. A dark cloud had drawn a veil over the moon. They were almost at the camp. There was a fire crackling in the middle, and the soldiers were preparing to sleep. Some were passing around pots of palm toddy. The singers were humming a ditty, and raucous laughter broke through the night from one of the ward's tents. Dancing girls were practicing their steps. Someone poured oil it in the fire, and it flared up, sending glowing fire ash into air. A soldier started barbecuing a piglet, and the breeze carried out a smell of charred meat mixed with the sweet smell of toddy. A bawdy joke was followed by his howls of laughter. What it was ignorable. You are trying to bite the hands that feed us, Katapa said as he placed his brother down. Would you have preferred that I died at his hands? Sherpa's eyes flared. There was no use to him now. His brother was hot tempered and reckless. He would have to make him understand later he had to reach him the virtue of duty and dharma. But this was not the time. Sleep well, Katapa said gently. The sky was clear now, and silver grey moonlight lit the tips of the grass, making them shine like diamonds. Where are we going, Anna? After a moment's silence, Katapa said, from tonight onwards, I have to sleep outside Prince Vigila's chamber. Sherpa did not reply. It would be the first time they would be sleeping separately since he could remember. A bat flapped its webbed wings over their heads and settled upside down on a branch above them. Anna, Shivappa asked in a soft voice, are you happy? Katappa wished he knew the answer. He hugged his brother and said it was my duty to be near him and protect him. Katappa could feel Shivappa tense up. Then his brother smiled. Katappa looked into his eyes. The reflection of the campfire in them made them appear to be flame. I am proud of you, Anna, Shivappa said. Was there a trace of mockery in his brother's compliment? Katappa tried to push the thought away. Katappa poured the extension of the silk carpet that jutted out of Balaji's tent like the tongue of a monster. I will be sleeping there, but I will have my eyes on you. On the carpet, Shivappa asked. Katappa did not reply. Behind them, the singer's rustic voice rose high, and there was a smattering of applause. Two Notch girls came running, their anklets tingling, and started whirling around the fire. Catcalls, whistles, and raunchy comments filled the air. A song started about the princess of Campania who lived 1,000 years ago and who wanted to bet 100 kings as many as days. The beats of Takil drums picked up a fancy, and another Nadaswara started following the singer tune to tune. Good place it is, Choppa said, struggling to be heard against the din of music and whistles. Katapa felt guilty that he would be sleeping on a carpet while his brother slept on the ground. Dew had started forming the grass, and he could feel its soft, cold body in his fingers. For the first time in his life, he was sleeping not on the naked floor but on a carpet. He had earned it, his first achievement in life. He felt sorry that he could not take his brother along and make him feel the softness of the carpet. Katappa's thoughts drifted to the carpet. He was eager to find out how soft it would be, the one with intricate designs on it, woven from the wool of the unborn kids, extracted from the womb of sheep, that he had to be soft. He had heard about 100 times from his father, though he had never felt it. He knew how one's feet would sink into his softness. It would have a fragrance, as the feet of the royals had treated on it many times. I just like how he could sometimes smell the silk dresses of the princes when they came near. He tucked his coat's lungi tight across his waist. Maybe one day he would have even be able to touch the silk dresses of the princes. Perhaps that was too ambitious. He was an untouchable. No one would allow him to touch those dresses. But that was the harm in dreaming. The music had paused, and the singers were readying for the next song. Good place for a dog, Shivappa said. It took a moment for the comment to register. Katappa felt anger rising from his toes. Shivappa had already turned to the other side. Katappa did not bother to the comment. He walked briskly past the soldiers' campfire and reached Vigila's tent. Two sentries stood with crossed spears as he approached. They moved their spears without asking any question. That felt good. Katappa peered in and saw Prince Vigila snoring. There was a little space on the carpet. He patted it a few times and curled up on it. He was a privileged slave, and he closed his eyes to thank the all merciful God before sleeping, just like his mother had taught him. Good place for a dog. Sherpa's comment kept coming up like undigested food. He tried to push it away, trying to think about his mother's words about being contented with his blessings. There were so many who did not have, even in this world, who did not have anything to eat, who had nothing to sleep on. He was blessed. He was a lucky man. It would be a long time before sleep sneaked into his eyes, and then he could watch the million stars in the sky. The words that Shirpa had said a few weeks back came rushing to his mind, unbidden and unwished for, on a dark, clear night like this. Some time back, they had been lying side by side. The sky was a diamond studded blanket over their heads, breaking Katappa's blissful reverie. His brother had asked, "Anna, I wonder whether a cruel god is boiling the stars in a black broth for fun, just like he dusted leaves thousands like us." Katappa turned to the other side, except for the smell of grass and the faint smell of footwear. The carpet was as good as he had imagined. He sighed, and his brother's voice whispered in his mind, "A good place for a dog."